I have a question. Do you like pickles? It's an important question because in our very own community, we are lucky enough to have some locally sourced and locally made pickles. They come from the Fort Collins Pickle Company. Their founder and owner, Michael Brawley, has been on this podcast before. Want to swing by and grab a jar? Find out where these wondrous pickles are by visiting their website, FortCollinsPickleCompany.com. It being wintertime, those habanero dills may just be what you need to make it through these winter nights. You could also drop one in your Bloody Mary this weekend. Not a bad idea, huh? I know. Now, on to our episode. Welcome to the More You NoCo, the podcast of Northern Colorado bringing our community together one conversation at a time. Local music? Did you know how much musical talent we have coming out of the NoCo area? It's overwhelming sometimes. We have hosted several musicians on the podcast before, and we shall continue to do so in the future. Today's guest is a shining example. We get to sit down with Jed Murphy, one half of the band Deborah. We talk about his path to the band, starting Bandwagon Magazine, and what it's like to struggle as an emerging artist. I think many listeners will be able to relate to pieces of Jed's story. Before hearing from our guest, let's hear a snippet of one of Deborah's tracks, Ronnie For Real, off of their brand new EP. We will feature another clip of Deborah's music at the end of the episode. Your newfound stardom here on the More You NoCo.
Here we go.
You're going to have to host an autograph signing session just to get over the PR press from this.
I can't wait.
Okay, I sit here in the Moxi Theatre with Jed Murphy, the founder and lead singer of the band Deborah, formerly known as Future Babes, and also a freelance journalist for the Westward magazine out of Denver. So, hello, and how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So, first thing I want to cover, just in case people are doing a quick Google search, the band's name is Deborah, but instead of an A in there, there's a 4. So it's
There's a 4.
DEBR4H. So, formerly known as Future Babes, why the name change?
Well, I gigged Future Babes pretty extensively for about 6 years. I went through a lot of member changes. I essentially set the band up as a way to play live solo or with a band if I needed to. I always liked synth projects that were in the box to where there was no computer being used. It was all hardware, like drum machines and synthesizers. And then you layer all other musicians on top of that. It just kind of became difficult to manage solo. I had a bass player who was pretty consistent with me for about 5 years, and then he got promoted at his job at Windsor Charter. He's out. Windsor Charter Academy doing IT, so he was very unavailable. And then I started recording a new EP, and it was a collection of songs I'd written over the last year that we never quite got around to recording. And then my girlfriend and I started dating, and she got tired of just sitting and watching me play music, so she decided to join the band out of pity.
She wanted in on the fun.
Yeah, and it is more fun to play music than to watch. She comes from a background of fashion and art. She worked for a fashion company in New York called J. Mendel, became friends with a lot of musicians, played in bands, and so she brought a perspective that I had been missing. And then it felt like it was just time. I had new band members. The EP is a new sound. It's recorded with Oliver Mueller of the band Slow Caves. They've built some heat locally and nationally. And so just the tone was different, and I felt like I was just carrying the weight pretty much solo. I was just constantly booking everything, doing all the social media, writing the music, practicing, and I never really had a group of musicians that really felt like a band. I've had band members, but none of them really wanted to be 100% in, other than Mikey, who was my bass player, but even then he was busy a lot of the times. And so now I have Oliver and his brother Jakob, who's also in Slow Caves, playing in the band. I have my girlfriend Kana, who's playing keys and singing harmonies, and it's turned into a whole new thing that it felt like it was the right time. Starting over with social media, total nightmare. It took me 6 years to get like 500 likes on Facebook, which is ridiculous because it doesn't matter, but it does.
Right.
And now I've got to redo it all over again, and rebuilding is pretty difficult, but it's all about the product. And this is the best music I've ever made. These are the best recordings I've ever made. I'm confident now more than I've ever been live. It feels like I'm starting over, not just starting over, but stepping into my best, brand new. And I'm like letting go of all the stuff and all the baggage I had with the old band. And it's amazing what changing a name will do for you. Things get so charged to a name. When you give a band a certain name, you put all this work into it, you feel like you've spent all this time building it up. Why would I just want to abandon it? It's a breath of fresh air for me personally, and I'm excited. I'm really excited.
Is your EP available already?
No, it'll be released January 17th.
Okay, so it's ahead of the release.
Yeah.
Most excellent.
I'll give you the mixes.
Oh yeah, we'll put up some links on the social media and such. Which, speaking of, going back to that, it is very hard to spread the word, right?
Yeah.
It's not like everyone in the state of Colorado has heard of Deborah or Future Babes in the past, had a chance to decide whether they like it or not, and then act upon it. It's just that 99% of the people in the community just simply haven't heard of you. They don't know that you're out there. And throwing that frisbee out to millions of people is very difficult.
Absolutely, and you become jaded when you don't get the response you're expecting. I see it a lot in younger bands. The hardest part is your first show. It's just putting the music together, getting it out there, putting yourself on stage in front of all these people, and then like 3 people show up. And then you release into the music, and then you release the music, and then turns out it's not as good as you thought it was. You just had your blinders on. You think just because you're creating something, it's awesome. And there's a tendency to lean towards that. If you focus too much on it, it'll eat you alive. It happened to me. I've seen it happen to several people I know. As artists, you're usually it's very vulnerable to write music, to perform music. You're showing a side of yourself that you don't show anyone, then all of a sudden you're showing everybody all at once, in an artistic form. When you just spend your time looking at the numbers and you're just counting clicks, you just lose sight of what you just start to wonder, like, what am I even doing? I'll never be a professional. I'll never create music as good as this person. And then you start comparing yourself to your peers who are getting clicks, and then you realize they're not even really getting clicks. It's like my friends who are in the best bands who get thousands of plays, it's still only thousands of plays when you need millions of plays. And it's an ugly, ugly game. But on the other side, when you put yourself out there and then you start creating music that people can identify with and attach themselves to, brings that life back to creating music, that you are an artist and that you are creating something that people like. So the trick is to stay focused to your local crew. The rule of thumb has always been local, regional, national. You start with your local scene, build to the surrounding areas, then you grow to national. And with the internet, your music gets drowned out. Everyone's releasing stuff every day.
There's so much.
There's so much. Everyone's doing something, and it's all amazing. And so how do you stand out when everyone is making great music? And the trick is just to don't stop. Just keep going, keep writing all the time. Just put the crap out. You got to do the bad stuff first before you can do the good stuff. And sometimes you got to take a hard look at something you made and realize it's crap. So
yeah, I was going to ask you what you think would be advice for people out there, or just some ruminations about how do we get past this harsh self-doubt that inevitably comes in with, I guess I'll commit and say a lack of patience when trying to get discovered, trying to get big from whether it be a band, a podcast, a blog, a journal that you put out, a YouTube series, a YouTube channel. I mean, there's so many things people can consume, and it makes us vulnerable to put things out there. And sometimes when you don't get the returns within 6 months or a year, those negative thoughts come flying in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so one of your pieces of advice is just keep pumping, keep doing it.
Yeah, just never stop creating. And just remind yourself that you're an artist, you're doing something because you love it. If you were like alone on an island and you had no audience at all, would you still be making music? If they left me on a desert island, I had food and, I don't know, a guitar or something, or a piano, I would still be writing music.
Right.
I'd still be producing stuff, even though it was just me by myself. Because as human beings, that's what we're drawn to do. It's in our nature. It's what separates us from, I guess, animals. It's this higher mode of communicating. You're exposing yourself, and then when you expose your own feelings, people put themselves in your shoes, then they feel those feelings, and it's a building process. Yeah, just never stop. Just remember that you're an artist, and you're an artist for a reason.
I had someone, I once chatted with her after we did a podcast recording. She's been on the show. And we were discussing that I, too, don't have as many listeners. I don't have as big of a following for the podcast as I wish. And she said, well, Ivan, if you had 5 listeners forever, would you still do it? Do you still love it? And it's funny because a podcast is sort of different, right? Producing this in the hopes that, if a third person never listened to it, well, then it's going to have to be intrinsically worth it to me just to sit down with you here today in the Moxi and enjoy this.
Yeah.
That's what I got to do. And I do, because I've met so many people in our community of Northern Colorado, and I've had conversations that I never would have dreamed or never would have been in that space had I not started this show.
Absolutely.
So she reminded me that I need to love it for what it is. Maybe the following will come and maybe it won't.
Yeah, and that's the gamble. People talk about, what was it like in the 60s or 70s when there was no internet and there were record labels and you could become famous in that regard. But people also forget that there were more teenagers at one time in the 60s and the 70s than any other period in American history. And so everyone was doing it. Right. Literally everyone was doing it. So you just met your competition face to face instead of on a screen. It's still the same. I mean, it's more people now than there were then, but you're still facing the same competition. Only now everyone can watch one person at one time instead of that one person building from a small group of people. But in places like Colorado, because there are, as far as cities to play in, Denver and Fort Collins, and I want to say Greeley because I love Greeley, and it's the Moxi Theatre, and this is where I came from. This is the scene I came out of. Yeah. But there's only the Moxi Theatre here. And so you can play in Colorado Springs, but it's a really small environment for that. So there's really only a handful of places that you can actually play. And so you still have to build that local community because you have to make it worthwhile for people to come out. So it's not that you can't just go play the same place every week and do the same 45-minute set, and expect a different result. When people, your friends have lives, your friends are busy, and you can't just expect everyone to drop what they're doing to come support you when you have a concert. But if your music's good enough, they will. And if you spread it out enough, and you just sprinkle in some content. And it's also about having something that when someone discovers you, they can go through your backlog. Right. And then suddenly they can really discover you. And then suddenly they're really, really into it. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But
Most excellent. Love it. We're getting lost in thought. One thing I want to cover is switching gears just a bit because I don't want the recording to turn off without covering it. But how did you find or cultivate the sound for Deborah, formerly known as Future Babes? How did you come into this style of music, and why is this your outlet of expression?
Basically, Growing up, my friends all listened to what we call butt rock. It's like Creed and System of a Down. It's that rock and roll sound that's just not quite heavy. It's not quite metal, but they're playing with heavy distorted guitars, but they're singing. I don't know, but that was like the popular stuff. And I never identified with it, and I would listen to it because my friends were listening to it, and they would make fun of me if I wasn't listening to it. But then I had this one friend named Ezra who didn't care what anyone was listening, didn't care what anyone said. And so he was listening to The Strokes, he was listening to Radiohead, he was listening to Interpol, and then I really got into that. And then when I got into college, I discovered this band called The Presets, which is an Australian synth pop band. Before I heard their music, I thought the synthesizer was only things like Nine Inch Nails or Marilyn Manson or Disturbed or something like that. I didn't realize that you could use a synthesizer to create like a pop, but still like dark and edgy sort of sound. Then I moved to Greeley, fell into some local bands, played guitar and stuff, and then I met a friend of mine, and we sort of explored sampling and drum machines and synthesizers together. Then we formed a band, and then I left to study abroad. And then I got back, and then he left to study abroad, and then he gets back, and our lives go separate directions. And so he took half the gear, I took the other half, and I had become tired of people quitting a band, and then suddenly the whole project was done because one person decided to leave. So I created, I was really sad because I was like essentially homeless at the time, and my ex-girlfriend had just broken up with me. Standard issue sob story.
It sounds like a song in the making.
Yeah,
man. I hope this is on the EP.
It was the first EP. And then essentially wrote the first EP just by myself with that half of the equipment that I had left over, and then convinced my friend Mikey to jump on as bass because I let him move in with me. And he felt obligated. And I did all the work. I made it as easy as possible for him.
Yeah.
And then over time, I'm really into like synth music, electronic, but not like the EDM stuff. I like a good vocalist, but I still have the rock side of me.
Yeah.
So I've always liked guitar. And Deborah is like the culmination of all that. And then plus my love for like deep songwriting, songs that represent people who just like live in life, the way like Bruce Springsteen writes his songs, and it's all about someone. And I realized that I could make songs that like told a story almost, and that I wanted people to feel those lyrics to like it represented their own story. And I produced a really bad EP, and then it's a couple really good singles, and then this is all of that coming to a head as Deborah and the new EP.
I do want to share some audio clips from the new EP from Deborah at the beginning and at the end. Is there a song or two that kind of sticks out to you on this that really comes from a special place, or you just love the whole thing?
Probably the song Ronnie for Real. It's the most emotional song I've probably written, and we just did a live performance video of it with Zach Visconti.
Previously on the show. We recorded it in his garage, a very cold morning at Mouse House. Ronnie for Real, and then the single Taipei Rock City. Okay. So hopefully we'll feature both these on this recording. But yeah, Zach Visconti, I was just at Mouse House doing a recording for the podcast. Neat guys, and
great guy.
Now I'm like exploring that whole scene because Corey Wright and Ben were both there.
Ben,
and I'm probably going to be interviewing them separately as well. So we'll see how this all unfolds.
Yeah, Ben did the videography.
Oh, really?
For the video.
For your music video. And we'll definitely be posting that as well.
Awesome.
In addition to Deborah and your music career that you've started here, you co-founded the Bandwagon magazine, which people who live up in northern Colorado probably definitely know what that is. But how did you come to start a magazine?
Well, I had graduated from UNC with a political science degree and a minor in English. I didn't feel drawn to public life or anything politically oriented. And then I met my friend Eli Corliss, the owner of the Moxi Theatre, where we're sitting, and he had just started his business, The Crew Presents, where he had literally one PA, and he was hosting just local shows at places here in Greeley. The Atlas Theater, where John Galt is now. Down the street, The Beetle, which is now Taste of Philly.
Oh,
It
yeah.
used to be a little music venue. And,
Really?
And I went to a show where this band called the Chain Gang in 1974 played. And they're an electronic group. And this guy, Cam, who went on to be the bass player for 303. And then the Chain Gang in 1974, side note, was featured on the game Grand Theft Auto 5. And it was in the trailer and has over 1 billion listens and views.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, and he was like a one-man electronic thing, and Eli had booked him, and I saw Eli's band, and he started the project mainly to promote his own band and his friends from Denver while he was getting his degree from UNC as well. And then that's was his main gig, was he would throw these little concerts, and then I started volunteering for him, and then he moved over to the Atlas Theatre, and then I became involved with the Atlas Church. And then at that time, the Atlas Church, the church band was like a who's who of musicians that would go on to do some pretty surprising things. The drummer was Eric Riley from the band In the Whale, who now does international tours. They're on the road like 180 days out of the year. Eli played guitar. This guy named Tim Coons was the music director, and he has a project called Giants and Pilgrims here in town. Phenomenal acoustic singer-songwriter. In that, I found a community of people who are really pursuing the artistic lifestyle of trying to develop a local community that was art-related, that was inclusive. I didn't quite fit into the whole religion thing, but I found it became my home. That's where I found my best friends that I would last for over a decade. Eli kind of struggled with doing shows for a while, and he moved to AF Rays, and I just helped out, and then he would book my band whenever I had one. And then one day we were just trying to think of a way to promote the local bands that we thought were so talented, and the local artists, and I was, waiting tables, and I had no real direction. We were at Chiba Hut, and Eli was like, let's start a magazine. And then I said, can I be editor-in-chief? And he goes, sure. And we had a friend who, this guy named Zach Watson, who's doing graphic design in the area, but he was the publisher of Greeley's previous independent magazine. I forgot what it was called, but it was like it was geared more towards student life, so it competed directly with the UNC Connection, or the Mirror.
Oh, right.
And it eventually went under. But we basically paid him. I got about like 5 or 6 friends from college who could write, and they all wrote an article. I wrote a letter from the editor. We did like one interview with this band called The Heyday that was playing, and Eli essentially sold $1,000 worth of ads to just local business owners that we had personal relationships with, and we just took a newspaper with things glued in there, said your ad here, and my friends turned in their articles, and we made an 8-page paper, printed 600 copies, did it the next month, and then did it the next month, and then it became a job, and then it became the 4th and 5th issue, and then really started to settle in that this was a thing, and it wasn't going away, and that as long as we made it happen each month, we couldn't. And I did that for the last 7 years, never missed an issue, never missed a month, fluctuated page count, but we went from 600 copies a month to 12,000. Now distribute Greeley, Fort Collins, Loveland, the entire northern Colorado region, southern Wyoming. Yeah, and it literally started with just us trying to find a way to help out our friends, to get some kind of promotion. And we've built up a lot of bands over that time. We have the Battle of the Bands every year, where the winner gets $1,000.
Oh, nice.
In the cover of the magazine. We've seen the Burros kind of come out of it, In the Whale. And then through that, I've personally been able to interview dozens of musicians of everywhere from international fame to people just starting out.
Yeah, you told me you had sat down once with Cold War kids.
Yep, interviewed Cold War kids over the phone. I interviewed, I can't believe. I was just thinking about all the people I've interviewed. There's a guy named Flume who's like a big deal now in EDM. I interviewed him over the phone. A guy named Ja Wolf hosted a press conference with BB McGill, Beyonce's guitarist.
Oh, nice.
And I don't know why it's all escaping me now. It's kind of ridiculous, this list of people I have.
So you started Bandwagon Magazine. You were editor-in-chief for 7 years. Why'd you decide to step away from that?
It was time. I kind of lost focus. It became a drag. for me to produce content each month when it shouldn't have been. And there's the nature of the beast where it's a print publication and a digital world. And we kind of capped out financially to where I could never quit bartending. There was never a time where I could just quit waiting tables and just do the magazine.
Right.
You just got to shift gears. You just got to change things up. And after 7 years, the magazine's still going strong.
Yeah, I see it everywhere.
Yeah. Then there's a realization at the end of the day, all I ever really wanted to be was just a music journalist. I didn't want to be an editor. I didn't want to be a manager. And as the editor and the manager, you are sitting around waiting for people to turn stuff in. You're waiting for people to show up. And that can become a huge hassle. And it is a nightmare, especially when you got to be at the restaurant at 3 o'clock to serve, a bunch of crappy little kids their meals. It became hard to see the forest from the trees, and I was ready for something new. Right. I was ready to expand my resume and get out and do something different.
And so now you get to freelance for the Westward magazine out of Denver.
That's right. It's freelance, I would say, is a loose term.
Now somebody else is waiting on you.
Yeah, exactly. It's very interesting to go to a bigger publication where they're printing out content daily. And
it's daily. Wow.
Yeah, and then it's like a weekly magazine or bi-weekly, I believe. Denver's biggest publication. The transition was difficult for me to go from being the one in charge to me sending in ideas just to get like a one phrase response, like a yes or a no. Really, it's pretty loose. What's interesting about me going to the Westward is that I had expected to be doing like high profile interviews. I was going to go in with my list of famous people who are coming to town, the way I had always done at the Bandwagon, but they actually only want me to write about local bands. That's just put me right back into what I was doing for 7 years.
You can't get away from it, man.
I can't get away from it.
It's your calling.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. So.
Being a person who has swam in the local art scene of music for the last 8 years, being a band member yourself, you've been a part of multiple projects around northern Colorado and Denver. What do you think now, 2019, for local scene of music?
I think it's the best it's ever been. Really exciting to see the stuff that is coming out of Colorado, especially at an underground level. Just the punk music and the metal bands and the alternative bands that are coming out are just incredible. Epiphanies, I would say, just be kind to everybody. Just be cool to everybody, because you never know when that person is going to come back into your life in some way, and how you treat them now will determine how they come back. Because you never know. You never know.
It sounds like it's come from personal experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are people I've seen who yes, but I also went to a seminar with the guy who started Warped Tour, this guy named Kevin Lyman, and he echoed that he was buying his house, and his realtor had worked as a security guard at one stop at Warped Tour, and said, "You were really cool to me when I was just a security guard working for you, so here's like some percentage points off on your interest rate to your house." So you just never know. Yeah, you never know when relationships are going to build. Don't give up.
Jed Murphy of Deborah, and that is DEBR4H. 4 replaces the A. And where can people expect? Do you have any live shows?
We're doing our EP release show on January 17th. January 17th at Globe Hall in Denver.
Okay.
We're co-headlining with a Denver band called Foxes, and that'll be Deborah's big debut, featuring Oliver Mueller and Jakob Mueller of Slow Caves.
Very nice.
Playing guitar and bass for us. And after that, no shows really booked, but going to be dropping new music, new merch. Just going to see what happens.
And where can people find the EP? Will it be on Spotify?
It'll be on Spotify, Bandcamp, SoundCloud, iTunes, all of it.
There it is.
If they want it, I'll mail it to you.
Okay, they can reach out to you.
Absolutely.
All right, Jed, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Before we head out today, let's hear another clip from a new track off Deborah's brand new EP, Taipei Rock City. Don't worry, we will be back soon, hearing from another person or a group of people on the more NoCo. Who will it be? As always, I want to thank Russell Isaac Long for the music used here at the more NoCo. Check us out on Instagram or Facebook for extra information, bonus content, and updates about guests who have previously been on the podcast. That's the more NoCo, all one word. Original, right? Thank you for listening and supporting the show. Until next time, peace!